awareness that kind of deficit is in my life, and just kind of paying more attention to that and what that means for myself as a mother, and paying, and being, thinking about that self-care language, but also what that means for my son. How do we create spaces to dream and have magical thinking when we're going and going and going and going. So
absolutely,
I love that.
I wanted to add to that. I'm sorry. I wanted to add this, kind of that. That's really important. What are we modeling for our kids? I feel like I'm, always dragging my poor child around, like, hurry up. I mean, I'm hurrying him on everything, and against my own logic and values, and exactly like you said, Ayanna, I'm not giving him time to think, to digest, to chew his food, and yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So much carb breakfast and snack. And, yeah. And so I wanted also, I connect with all of those pieces. And I appreciate each of your really eloquent articulation around all of those pieces and the nuances of it. And then there's this other side too that I also want to kind of talk about in terms of like how our kids, well, I'll speak for me. One of the biggest joys that being a working mom has for me is that, or being a mom has for me is that, in some ways I do get to experience life through the eyes of Asha, right? And so she has this capacity to either make me stop or pull me or take me out of things, so that I'm kind of almost forced to be able to think about things differently and reevaluate. So like just this morning, we're driving to school. And so we do I drop her off in the morning, but she is in aftercare. A lot of that is driven by the fact that I will teach afternoon classes that don't end until 4 and school ends at 3 or 3:10 or something, right? And so every kind of couple months, we come around to this same conversation. And it was, again, this morning, Mommy, could I ever be a car rider? Like, could you ever just come pick me up right when school is out? I don't want to have to stay for after school. And so I hear her saying, like, I want more time with you. And I want to, go to the park in the afternoon instead of like going to after school, then come home and then we do homework and then there's dinner and then it's bedtime, right? There's that regimentation that is there. And so I'm having this conversation with her, like, babe, I wish that were true, but it's really hard. Like, mom has work responsibilities and there's a place I have to be at a certain time that's required of me. And her kind of being frustrated and like not understanding, like, but I'm just asking, like, she's like, just ever, like never, ever. Right.
No.
So then part of me is like, okay, is there a way that I can meet this need? And now I'm not going to, clearly I have work responsibilities and there are things that are just out of my control, but how can I hear her, right? How can I say that, honor that there's something she's saying here that's important to her, and let me figure out how I can make that happen. Maybe it's one Friday or something in the month that I can figure out how to get her to be a car rider and we can have that. But so for me, like, that's one of the things that I find invigorating and just joyful about being a parent is that she, in her lens on the world, challenges kind of me and my lens on the world. And I'm wondering, like, what are your joys in parenting, right? Because this is not easy. Like, parenting ain't easy. And we are tired a lot and it is hard and there's emotional labor and all of that stuff. And I'm also wondering, like, what are the joys in it for you?
Well, I think it's important to be reminded and surround ourselves by that question because, it is a lot of work, especially, thinking about being a working mom. And so I'm glad you asked that because it makes you kind of dig.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you think about it on a daily level, there's so much joy that you have. For me, I've learned to break it down to the small moments. I don't need to get too big picture. I have a sense of the big picture, but the way that I find joy is the small pieces, the small moments, and this, and being fully present. and to just kind of be reminded of the sense of wonder that I'm presented with through this little being who's, relatively new to this world, and so I'm reminded by that in all the observations that, he sees all the time. From the kind of other perspective, it can drive me crazy with all the questions that I'm presented with. Why? So I am being asked that question from when you first wake up until you go to sleep. And but the positive of that is that there's this great sense of wonder when you ask me of how far a star is, and I have to actually look that up, and we we look it up on the web, and we create this kind of bonding moment for ourselves. And I what I've learned to do is say, well, Z, I don't know the answer to that. Hey, let's look it up, and I pause and create this kind of moment for us to kind of bond and learn together and discover. So I feel like this kind of sense of wonder and sense of discovery is really important to me. I want to just say one other thing, too, that I think about, that I'm reminded of when I just revisited my grandmother, too, is just this kind of intergenerational love that I have through my son, because I see he forces me to reach out more, and I see the bonds that he has with a great grandmother, and all these relationships, that this web of relationships that I have actively facilitated, and so that also brings me that love that he has, that familial love, and also the love and network I have with my friends, and it brings me a lot of joy as well.
Yeah. Elisa?
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. It seems like they never run out of things to say and talk at lightning speed all the time. But I think for me, it's a little bit of what both of you are saying, which is, it's like he's a limit for me, a pause. Before I had him, I was really all into my studies, and I remember my, family members, my aunts would say, "Are you ever going to have a boyfriend? Are you ever going to," my friends would, try to drag me out of the library. And, I was just very into, so I have these tendencies, I think, to go overboard in work already, like I've already talked about. And I can't with him, I have to stop at some point. I have to come back. And it's a daily reminder of that, but it's a beautiful reminder. He's created this kind of balance in my life that I never imagined that I would have. And, and so it is, really having something much more real and concrete, I feel. And this isn't to judge anybody who chooses not to have children. I mean, everybody, again, has their own journey, but for me, this is more real. It's more valuable than anything else. And so if something shitty is going on at work, and or something is happening, something is always happening, I can always kind of remember what's more important, what's more valuable, what's happening. Is my child in good health? And in many ways, like you were saying earlier, Ayanna, it's having the opportunity through him to live this kind of crazy, creative, nonsensical world that they inevitably live all the time, and that at least one of the biggest fears I have is that I will, that I need to support that in him, to not have him grow out of that too soon. I mean, I think it gets taken away from us too soon, that imagination, that freedom to just kind of think beyond all boundaries. And so, living those kind of crazy moments, Ollie likes to dance a lot, and he, so he just gets up while he's eating and starts dancing, and I was you're digesting, sit down, but he needs to do that. And another thing he does is it's like at the moment when we are the craziest, right when we have to leave the house, we're at the door, or right when we have to get out of the car, we're at school, we got to get out of the car and get into the school, he has to give me a hug. He has to do that. And usually it's so frustrating because I'm like, right now, like we need to go right now. And, you know, the other day he stopped me and he said, I don't know, I always have to do this. I guess it's just my thing, you know? And so, you know, it's like crazy pauses that he forces me to have, you know, when I'm with him. But it's a lot of like what you were saying, Nikki, about also just forcing you to reflect on yourself and always try to be a better person, right? And work on these aspects of ourselves that we want to improve and grow in.
Work in progress is all like, if there's a tombstone for me, I wanted to say she was a work in progress. Like, you know, one time I remember to this thing. Asha is a character. She is a jokester. She just this morning we were driving in and listening to morning radio, which I always think is horrible. But we were kind of channel surfing, and this one woman was trying to kind of make a joke or whatever, and she was a little bit laughing at herself, like, haha, like, come on guys, like, you know, and Asha was like, she's not funny at all. And so I'm like, actually she's not. And then she goes, I'm funny, right? And I was like, yeah, you are. She was like, my jokes are way better than hers. And I was like, yeah, they are. And so that's her thing. Like, if Ali stopping to give hugs, like, Asha's got to she makes me laugh, or she does something silly. And I remember thinking probably about a year or so ago, I'm trying to do something, right? Probably breakfast or like grab a muffin bar, put your shoes on, let's get out of the door or something. And she stopped to do something silly. And in my mind, like literally the first thing in my mind was like, you play too much. And then I was like, and then I thought, she's 5, right? Like she's supposed to play too much. Right. Yeah. Right. But it's such this dichotomy of like, I got to keep this ship running. I got to get this house. I got to keep this household going. This is a machine. This is an enterprise. And I have to attend to this whole person that's growing and discovering the world. It's always this little bit of like, what is happening right now?
I mean, I think one thing with me and Z this week is it was the Dr. Seuss. Remember, I think his birthday or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. All I know is I saw a week of activities that, you know, they wanted to do. And, you know, Zahir was driving the boat and, you know, or driving the car and kind of just, you know, he really wanted to do all these things. So I had this moment where, you know, you talk about wanting them to experience this kind of sense of play, but also being exhausted. And he told me he wanted to do everything on that page. And you know what? I support that as a creative person. We can do that. Just meet me halfway. But I just had this moment where he wanted to be, one day was pick your favorite Dr. Seuss character and dress up as them. So he wanted to be Cat in the Hat. So I just remember us doing the final touches early in the morning on the red and white tall cap and, you know, pinning the tail on him. And me just being very, very frustrated doing all this, you know, putting a little red bow tie on him. And then me screaming at him as we're running out the house, trying to be on time. And then finally he walks, you know, through the gate of the school. And he is happy as can be with his shoulders back and proud. And just his little tail is wagging behind him. And that little hat is kind of off at a weird little angle to the side. But he is confident as can be. So I just, you know, it is just thinking about that juggling of like creating those moments of, you know, sense of play, but then just also just being exhausted. You know,
exhausted. I know, and that is a lot. I mean, again, in our different chat streams and texts, like sometimes I want both of you all to know that we're all saying the same things, right? Like sometimes it's just that, like, girl, I'm tired, like that's, and that's all we got for each other.
Yes,
and it'll be like, I know, me too, right? Like,
yes,
because it is a lot of work. I had dinner with a friend. Asha and I had dinner with a friend who was in town for a conference. And she's a married mom, and she has a toddler. And I was talking about, you know, some of the unique strains of being a single parent. And she looked at me. She was like, Nikki, do you know like how much you actually do? And I was like, yeah. She's like, I don't think you do. She's like, I think if you really knew how much you do, it would not be good. Like she said, I'm worried you might like hurt somebody. And I was like, you're probably right. I probably do kind of suppress the amount of work that's done.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for you,